The South African rugby community is in mourning today following the passing of former Springbok wing Hendrik Jacobus Vanzil, known to friends, teammates, and fans simply as Henny. Vanzil passed away on Monday at the age of 89, bringing to a close a life that included a remarkable chapter as one of the most exciting players to wear the green and gold during the early 1960s. SA Rugby has paid tribute to a man who represented his country with distinction during a golden era of Springbok rugby, a player whose speed and try-scoring ability made him a feared opponent and a beloved figure among South African rugby supporters. At the time of his passing, Vanzil held the distinction of being the second oldest living Springbok, a poignant reminder of the passage of time and the gradual loss of the generation that helped build the foundations of South African rugby's proud tradition. Only Freek du Preez, who celebrated his 90th birthday on the 28th of November, now stands as an older living representative of that era. These men are living links to a different time in rugby history when the game was amateur, when players held down full-time jobs alongside their international careers, and when the physical demands and rewards were vastly different from what modern professionals experience. Henny Vanzil was born on the 31st of January 1936 near Ventersdorp, a small town in what was then the Transvaal province. Growing up in rural South Africa, Vanzil would have experienced a childhood far removed from the professional sporting infrastructure that exists today. Rugby in that era was played for love of the game, on dusty fields, with equipment that would be considered primitive by modern standards. Yet from these humble beginnings emerged a player with exceptional natural talent, particularly when it came to speed. Vanzil possessed what rugby people often describe as gas, that rare ability to accelerate away from defenders and cover ground at a pace that few could match. Interestingly, Vanzil didn't begin his rugby career as a winger. Like many fast players of his generation, he started out in the forwards, where his physicality and work rate would have been assets. But at some point, someone recognized that his speed was too valuable to be confined to the tight exchanges and scrums. The decision to move him to the wing proved to be inspired, transforming Vanzil from a useful forward into a genuinely dangerous attacking threat who could change the course of a match with a single moment of brilliance. Vanzil made his Springbok debut on the 5th of June 1960 against New Zealand in Johannesburg at the age of 24. Test debuts are nerve-wracking occasions for any player, but Vanzil announced his arrival on the international stage in spectacular fashion by scoring 2 tries. To score twice on debut against the All Blacks, one of rugby's most formidable opponents, was a remarkable achievement that immediately established Vanzil as a player of genuine quality. Those watching at Ellis Park that day witnessed the emergence of a star, a speedster who could exploit space and finish with clinical precision. If his debut was impressive, what came next was even more spectacular. A year later, in 1961, Vanzil faced Australia at the same Johannesburg venue and recorded a hat-trick of tries. Scoring 3 tries in a test match is rare in any era, but to do so against quality opposition demonstrated that Vanzil's debut heroics were no fluke. He was the real deal, a left winger with devastating pace who had become a cornerstone of the Springbok backline. By the time his international career concluded, Vanzil had played 10 tests in 1960 and 1961, representing the Lions, as Transvaal was then known, and his country with distinction. SA Rugby President Mark Alexander offered heartfelt condolences following news of Vanzil's passing. And in doing so, he shared a story that speaks volumes about the character of the man behind the player. During the Springboks Grand Slam tour of Britain and Ireland between December 1960 and January 1961, tragedy struck Vanzil's family when his father passed away back in South Africa. This was an era before easy international communication, before players could simply hop on a flight home, before video calls could connect families across continents. Vanzil was thousands of miles from home, dealing with unimaginable grief while his teammates prepared for some of the most important matches of their careers. What happened next reveals everything about Henny Vanzil's dedication to his team and his jersey. Despite the devastating personal loss, despite being unable to be with his family during their time of grief, Vanzil never gave anything but his best for the Springboks. He continued to train, to prepare, to play when selected, and to give everything he had for his teammates and his country. This level of commitment and professionalism, maintaining standards even while dealing with profound personal tragedy, marks Vanzil as a special individual. It's easy to talk about playing for the jersey, about sacrifice and commitment, but Vanzil lived those values in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. The Grand Slam Tour of 1960 and 1961 was one of the great achievements in Springbok rugby history. The team traveled to Britain and Ireland and defeated all the home nations, a feat that required consistency, resilience, and character across multiple test matches in challenging conditions far from home. Vanzil was part of that historic squad, contributing his speed and try-scoring ability to a collective effort that enhanced South African rugby's reputation on the global stage. Sadly, Vanzil's health began deteriorating in recent years. He faced a battle with dementia, that cruel disease that slowly robs individuals of their memories, their personality, and ultimately their independence. For a man who had been a supreme athlete, whose speed and power had thrilled crowds and tormented opponents, the gradual decline that dementia brings must have been particularly difficult to witness for those who loved him. On Monday, Vanzil finally lost that battle, passing away peacefully after years of struggle. Mark Alexander's tribute captured the appropriate tone of respect and sadness that Vanzil's passing deserves. He extended thoughts and prayers to Vanzil's family, friends, and loved ones, acknowledging the difficulty of this time while encouraging them to find solace in memories of someone who represented South Africa with pride and made his mark on the history of rugby in the country. These aren't empty words or standard sporting platitudes. They reflect genuine appreciation for what Vanzil contributed during his time as a Springbok and recognition of the personal qualities that defined him both on and off the field. Looking back at Vanzil's career from the perspective of modern rugby, it's important to remember how different the game was in his era. There was no professional circuit, no lucrative contracts, no sports science support, no video analysis. Players trained in the evenings after working full days at their regular jobs. They paid their own way to training, washed their own kit, and received no financial compensation for representing their country. What drove them was pure love of the game and pride in wearing the Springbok jersey. In that context, Vanzil's achievements become even more impressive. He competed at the highest level while managing all the other demands of adult life, and he did so with distinction. The passing of players from earlier eras is always a poignant moment for sporting communities. These men carried the torch before current players were born, establishing traditions and standards that still resonate today. When someone like Henny Vanzil passes away, a direct connection to history is severed. There are fewer people who can speak firsthand about what rugby was like in the early 1960s, fewer who remember the personalities and stories that brought that era to life. As the years pass and more of that generation leaves us, it becomes increasingly important to honor their memories and ensure their contributions aren't forgotten. Henny Vanzil lived 89 years, and while his time as a Springbok represented just a small portion of that long life, those 2 years from 1960 to 1961 defined his public legacy. He will be remembered as a speedster who terrorized defenses, as a try-scorer who delivered in the biggest matches, and as a man who showed incredible strength of character during personal tragedy. Rest in peace, Henny Vanzil. Your contribution to South African rugby will not be forgotten.